Hello everybody, thank you for joining my video. Today we will be learning how to sew reusable menstrual pads. First, you will begin by getting your backer fabric, your core absorbent fabric, your comfortable top fabric, your pins, your fabric scissors, your marker or pen, your thread, your needle if you're hand sewing, or your sewing machine. You will need something pointy but not sharp to turn your pads inside out with. This is a metal straw. You will need your template of your choosing and your fasteners. Here I have plastic cam snaps along with the cam snap pliers. There are many different options for fasteners as well as the lead to make the holes to apply the cam snaps. You will start by gathering your fabrics. First you have your topper fabric, your core fabric, this is flannel, and then my fleece, which is the backer fabric. You will then iron out all of the wrinkles on your topper fabric. You will then lay your topper fabric with the pretty side down so that the less colorful side will be facing you. You will then put your main template down close to the edge, but leaving still about half an inch between the edge of the fabric and the edge of your template. Make sure the pretty side is facing down as I am showing here in the video. This, you are drawing on the wrong side of the fabric. That's what that is called. You'll then take your marker and you will trace around the edge. Once you have finished tracing, you will then take your scissors. Here I am using a fabric rotary cutter wheel, but fabric scissors work just as well. And you are going to cut with about half an inch between where you are cutting and the line that you have just traced. This will be a seam allowance. You will cut all the way around the edge of where you traced. Once you have finished cutting, it should look like this. You are then going to take your core fabric. Here I'm going to be doing 2 layers of flannel, so I will fold my fabric in half. It does not matter which side you are starting on. You are going to take your core template and lay it on the fabric. You don't really need to have spacing, but make sure that you are using good fabric where you are tracing. You are then going to trace the core template all the way around. If doing multiple layers of fabric, it may be helpful to pin around the edges of the template that you are tracing. Also, when doing multiple layers, it is helpful to pin inside where you have traced. Here I am going to cut on the line that I have traced, and for beginner sewers, it should be helpful to pin inside the trace before cutting it out. Be careful when you are cutting out your fabric that you realize that you are cutting out the core. The core and the topper fabric and the backer fabric are cut out in different ways because the core fabric you are cutting on the trace line and the topper fabric is cut with half an inch seam allowance between the trace line and where you are trimming. Here I have a finished core. I will then carefully pin inside the core to make sure the layers do not separate. It is easier to do this step before cutting out, but you can also do it this way. When you are finished cutting and pinning, it should look like this. Then you will take your topper fabric, iron it out beforehand, make sure it is smooth, and put the right side down so the non-colorful side is facing you along with the trace line. You will then take your core and place it in the center of the trace line. You will then repin it so the core is pinned in the center of the topper fabric. It helps to have this ironed out and make sure it's wrinkle-free. Once you have this fully pinned, it should look like this. You will then take it to your sewing machine or start hand sewing. On the sewing machine or hand sewing, you will sew right on the edge of the core. Here, there is hardly any space between where I am sewing and the edge of the core. This will make sure that the core is secure. Make sure you do not slip off of the core when sewing. Slowly go around each turn. And make sure you are sewing carefully to avoid running over any pins that you put in. Make sure you take out your pins along the way so that they do not get caught in the machine. Make sure to go careful around the edges. Once you have come to a close, you're going to backstitch a few times or just restitch an area that you have already stitched to make sure that the stitches do not come out after you are finished sewing. You are then going to trim your thread and trim off any excess threads. You are then going to clean up your core. For example, here I am taking the fabric scissors and cutting off any little bits of extra core fabric that are a little long that might end up curling once they are inside the pad as you are washing it. Then you will take your backer fabric and you will put it with the wrong side facing up. So for something like fleece, it is easier to say that put the fuzzy side facing up. You want the fuzzy side to be on your underwear so then it helps the pad to grip. So that way when you are sewing it, you need to have the fuzzy side facing up. You are going to put the topper fabric so that it is on the edge of the backer fabric. You do not need to account for any excess fabric. You are then going to pin the topper fabric to the backer fabric so that you can cut it out. You are then going to begin cutting out the fabric and use the topper fabric as a template and a guide as to where to cut. You do not want to cut the topper fabric, and you do not need to cut it any bigger than the topper fabric. You can cut off any excess that you have, but here I am not because I don't feel it is necessary. Once you are done, it should look like this. You will then take it to your sewing machine or begin by hand sewing. You will then start at the top left corner and you are going to sew on the trace line all the way around, but you're going to stop to leave about 1.5 inch to 2 inch opening. So you should start sewing, sew a few stitches, and then make sure you backstitch. Make sure to take out your pins along the way. So when you are backstitching, you are basically sewing backwards. This helps to strengthen the thread and make sure that it's in there securely. You will need this because you are creating the turning hole. The turning hole is important because that will help you create the finished pad. You make sure to go slowly around the turns. Make sure to pick up your presser foot if you are making sharp turns such as the corners. In reality, you should be sewing way slower than here I am in the video. Here it is sped up, so you must go slower in order to make sure that you have a good looking pad at the end. Here you are sewing the shape of the pad, so it is important that you are accurate on sewing the trace line. Once you are coming to the short edge that you started on, you are going to go slow. You're going to take out your final pin. Make sure to stop here to make a turning hole. You're going to backstitch a few times and go forward once again. You're going to cut the thread to release it from the sewing machine. Remove all extra pins that you did not move before. Then you are going to trim any extra thread that is hanging loose. You should have a turning hole of about 1.5 inches to 2 inches and sewn all the way around everywhere else. You will then start to cut off the excess fabric. Make sure you do not cut the thread that you have just sewn. Around the turning hole, make sure to leave some extra fabric. Here, leave about 1/2 inch where the turning hole is placed. This will be so you have enough room to tuck in the fabric when you turn the pad inside out. It is very important that you follow that step or else your pad will not be able to close. Be very careful on the corners especially, and make sure that you leave enough room for the thread to have enough space. Here I'm leaving about 5 to 10 millimeters of fabric left. When you have finished cutting all the excess fabric off, it should look like this. You are then going to cut into the corners, not like this. This is an example of how not to cut it at first. because this runs the risk of cutting the thread. You are going to be cutting just up to the thread. You are doing this to avoid the bunching when you turn it inside out. You should cut it like this, using the tip of your scissors, so you don't cut the thread as easily. You are going to make sure you cut little edges and wedges around all of the curves to avoid bunching when you turn it inside out. If your pad bunches when you turn it inside out, you did not trim it correctly and you did not cut enough wedges. Your pad should look like this at this stage, and then you are going to rub around the fabric to try to separate the sides, and you're going to start slowly and patiently turning the pad inside out. This step is very tedious. You must be patient while doing this step to assure that your pad turns inside out correctly. The bigger the turning hole is, the easier the turning process will be. You are going to push and pull the fabric to turn it inside out slowly. Once you have the majority of the fabric out, it is useful to use that pointy tool I mentioned at the beginning of the video. You could use a knitting needle, a metal straw, a chopstick, or anything like that to help turn the edges properly. And you're going to rub the fabric together around the edges to help crispen the seams. This just helps to make sure that all of the fabric is properly turned. Here in the video, I'm using my metal straw to help push out all of the seams to make sure that the pad is completely turned inside out. Don't use anything sharp such as a knife or anything that might puncture the fabric or cut yourself, but just something small enough to reach into the hole and get around the edges. You are then going to take the excess fabric that you left around the turning hole and tuck it in. You're going to tuck it in so it looks like it is aligned with the rest of the edges, so that it looks like there is no hole. This is a very difficult step sometimes, but you just got to be careful and patient and make sure that the edges align properly. Make sure the fabric is tucked in securely. You are then going to iron it down and make sure that the seams are crispen. You're going to make sure you iron a little extra where the turning hole is to make sure that that fabric is folded in correctly. You are then going to take it to your sewing machine and you're going to sew around the edge. You're going to do it right around where my fingernail is showing you, and you're going to start on the turning hole to make sure that the fabric does not pop out as you are sewing. Make sure to backstitch a few times as you start, and then you're going to sew about 1/4 inch from the edge. This will help hold your pad together and make sure that it retains its pad shape as you use it. Be sure to pick up your pressure foot as you turn the corners and go slowly around the corners. As you come back to the part where you started, you are going to slow down and backstitch a few times and make sure that your thread is properly secured. You are then going to cut your thread, take it off the sewing machine, and trim off any extra threads that you have on each side. Your pad should look like this. You are then going to put on your fasteners. Here I will show you how to put on plastic cam snaps, but there are many other videos on the internet of how to put on other things. Here I got my lead, which is a sharp thing, my pliers, as well as each part of my snaps, the 2 pointy parts and each end. I will begin by putting my pad on with the upside down and fold the wings over so that they just overlap. And make sure that the wings do not cause the pad to bunch up, but make sure that they overlap just enough. You're then going to take your sharp part and stab a hole through. Make sure you do not stab the pad itself. You are then going to use the pointy part of the snap and insert that into one edge of the wing. Make sure it goes all the way through. You're then going to take the other part of the snap, put that on, and then use the pliers to put it on. So I will place the flat part into the cup and pinch down hard. I will then check to make sure that I know which side to place the next snap on. So I will then put the next pointy side on the other side of the other wing. Make sure it goes all the way through the hole, and then I will take the other side of the snap and place it on correctly. I will then do the same thing with this snap and squeeze it down hard. Once you have completed that step, you will then have a finished pad. There are many other ways to make pads, so there are many other videos on the internet. This is just my rendition. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. If you like this video, please check out my website, leave a like on this video or a comment, as well as completing my survey on my website or in the description bar below. Thank you!